Hey everyone, it's QuickyBaby and welcome back to World of Tanks, and today I'm going to be letting you know about one of my vehicles which I thoroughly recommend is just totally not worth it at tier 10, is the AMX M454. So today's video is going to be a two-parter. Firstly, we're going to be playing the tier 10 AMX M454. It's French, it's heavy, it's got nice frontal armor, and it has a pretty big gun if you choose to use the 130mm gun. That's because this tank has two competitive guns on it. It has 130mm and it has a 120mm. Now, I actually think the better gun on this tank is the 120mm because you have far better premium penetration. Your penetration on the 130mm is an abysmal 280. As we're going to see in this game, 280, what are you really going to do against some of the super heavy tanks on the enemy teams? With those premium rounds, even if you manage to hit their weak points flush, there's a very good chance that you're going to roll the pen low enough that you don't actually go in. Now, next you might be thinking, well, why are you using the 130mm on this tank and not using the 120 if you think it's the better gun? Well, it's pretty much because of the tank that you saw me looking at enviously as we were making our way into position. The Conqueror. Well, not really the tier 9 Conqueror, but the Super Conqueror. The Super Conqueror at tier 10 just has a so much better 120. Do you want rate of fire? Do you want aim time? Do you want gun handling? Do you want 2 extra degrees of gun depression? Do you want to have space protection, protecting you from heat rounds on the cheeks? Do you want to also not have a big old weak point on top of the tank like this one? The Super Conqueror absolutely annihilates the AMX M454 in pretty much every way apart from lower plate armor. And maybe this thing is also faster in a straight line as it is limited to 40 kilometers an hour. I would so rather play the Super Conqueror than play the AMX M454 at tier 10. So much so that I don't use the 120mm when I play this tier 10 tank. Because I just think I'm a bad Super Conqueror. But when I use the 130mm on this tank, it's actually a pretty interesting vehicle. It's fairly interesting. The tank is kind of like a Panzer VII that doesn't rely so much on side scraping, and everybody knows that the Panzer VII has such abysmal weak point on the side when you do side scrape that tank that it kind of renders the vehicle obsolete. It's a bit like the alpha damage, not quite that you would have on the 703, but to be able to, not the 703, sorry, the 705, gosh, I was talking about the double barrel tank, yeah, but it kind of does have the less alpha damage than the double barrel tank at tier 8, crazy things, right? But the tier 10 Soviet side scraper, that 705, kind of in that alpha damage region with the 560. And more importantly, this 130mm allows you to do some funky overmatching. You will be able to overmatch all 43mm plates that the enemy tanks may have. And there's quite a few roof decks that you can manage to go through with a 130 that you couldn't go through with a 120, as a 120 will ricochet off 40mm plates and the 130 won't. So this tank, it does have some things that are good about the vehicle if you use the 130, but definitely it's not the damage per minute. 2,126 just doesn't feel right for a vehicle that doesn't have thick side armor, it doesn't have incredible alpha damage or something to really make up for it. I think the Wargaming were probably, and there you go, that's a premium round, 280mm premium round bouncing off the weak point of the Moisien. And that's something that just happens so often with this tank. When you truly meet the ultra heavy vehicles, you know, when you're trying to deal with an Object 279E, yeah, good luck, you pretty much just can't penetrate anywhere on the front of his vehicle and you're just hoping that he manages to mess up against you. And when you're fighting against a mouse, and the mouse is doing some really good angling work, you even have a lot of trouble with going through the cheeks. And so I decide I've had enough of this, and so I'm going to make my way around the flank, and I'm going to try and support this VK 16801 to be able to cut through the tier 10 tank, and then hopefully get some side shots into the mouse and get a side shot into the IS-3. Now, the game that you see me playing here was at the end of a pretty good streak of games. I actually managed to average 4,000 damage over, I think it was a 12-game session in this tank. Maybe I was just getting fortunate on that evening because this tank's actually got one of my lowest average damages of any tier 10 vehicle. Maybe it's just because, you know, you have your tanks that you hate and you can't be bothered to play, or maybe you just don't be patient and play them in the correct kind of way. I'm sure that if any of you out there really like the look of the French heavies and you think, oh, it looks like, oh, I like this kind of alpha damage and thick frontal armor, I don't mind having a weak point on top because I'm going to make it hard for my opponents to be able to shoot, and I really can't stand playing something like a Super Conqueror, then you can still make this tank work. don't get me wrong. It's just there's a reason why you don't see people playing these things inside the ranked game mode and you see people playing Super Conquerors instead. And that's just because of the extra gun depression, the extra rate of fire, and even the better HESH rounds that you have on this tank. Now I feel a little bit bad in this situation. You saw that I actually tried to overmatch the roof deck of the mouse, but we can see it's too thick. The mouse wants to shoot me, and I'm going to kind of use this VK1608 to be able to get an extra shot into the mouse. I feel pretty bad about that. I have to admit, in this game, I wasn't tilt because I was having a very good session of playing this tank. But I was only playing this tank for one reason. I really don't like this tank at tier 10. I was playing this tank to get an ace tanker in it, so that as soon as I got an ace tanker in this vehicle, I would drop my crew back down again to tier 9. Weird concept that. It seems that you would want to progress up the tech tree. You'd feel that obviously the higher tier tank is going to be the better tank. And sure, I think the AMX M4 54 is definitely going to be an all-round better vehicle than the tier 9. Although there are some bizarre features about this vehicle. For example, the fact that it's got this double lip lower plate, which I can just show you here. If I can go there quickly, yes. So one thing that's bizarre about this tank is it actually has a double-shaped lower plate. What this means is it actually makes your lower plate much better on this vehicle. But this mid bar around here is actually much easier to penetrate than on the tier 9 variant of the vehicle if you're not using well, I guess if you are using your gun depressions, that's going to be weaker, but if you're unable to hide it. And while it definitely makes the upper plate better, and it makes this mid plate better in a situation where they can't get clean shots into your lower plate, against premium rounds, this is a big old weak point that you don't even have on the tier 9. So all of these bizarre things have led to the fact that the tier 9 is just so much better tier for tier. But there's one way that I can say it. How about I just show you? So now we're playing in the tier 9 variant of the AMX M4. This is the AMX M4 51, and I'll forgive all of you that probably wouldn't know that if I didn't tell you precisely, because as you can see, this tank looks pretty much identical to the tier 10. It kind of even cements even more the feeling that I get that what the hell is the point of the tier 10 tank down this tech tree? It looks the same. It's practically the same kind of vehicle at tier 10 as it was at tier 9, but you get to use a 130mm, which is kind of a worse gun than the 120 was. Now, I'm actually using the stock gun on this vehicle, as if you need even more reasons to be able to play this tank. And this stock gun has 257mm of penetration, 315 on its premium rounds, and 400 alpha damage. And that just allows this thing to do some monstrous, absolutely ridiculous things inside World of Tanks. When you think that it's frontal hull armor, well, it's still a little bit worse, especially on the upper plate against premium rounds, than the tier 10 version of this tank. Do you see how the mid plate, well, you do have this bar which is a little bit weaker because of the angling of it? That means that if you're using your gun depression, it's actually better, and they will be ricocheting off the upper plate, and especially off that upper plate on this, well, off the mid plate of this tank, as I should say. Remember how the previous tank has the mid plate angled down? This one has the mid plate angled up. And so this game was from my first play session of having this tank again. When I first played this vehicle, I liked it, but I didn't know why I liked it. I guess I kind of did at the time, but I didn't fully appreciate just how incredible this tank was. When I first played it, when the tech tree was released, when those French tech trees were released, I believe in 2017. This was the Christmas content for 2017, which was so lackluster after that incredible double Swedish tech tree release of 2016. Maybe that's probably also why I don't really like these vehicles, although I like the tier 9. I like the tier 9. So when I first played this tank, I knew I liked it because it had thick frontal armor, had some good mobility, had all-round damage per minute, aim time, penetration, everything you need, and just this incredible upper hull and turret that a lot of people just fire at, even with big old 155mm guns like that T10 there with its 276mm of penetration. There aren't many tier 9 heavy tanks where I'd feel comfortable just sitting in front of a T10 while exposing most of my upper plate, but I will do in a vehicle like this. So when I first played it, I thought, wow, this is great. How am I managing to get 70% wins in this vehicle playing solo, even at tier 9? I didn't fully appreciate that it's because the vehicle probably is one of, if not the best heavy tanks in the game, tier for tier. And that's why I'm having so much fun playing this tank again. Not because it's incredible, but it's also an opportunity to really test about whether the top 10 videos that I released in the last month, and this was at the top of the heavy list. This was the highest win ratio, or at least on the European server, out of any tier of heavy tank that was freely available inside a tech tree. It's a pretty impressive statistic for this vehicle, considering that it is also played by a lot of players. And I don't know, as it's, I guess, hopefully I'm not popularizing it too much. If I popularize this tank a little bit too much, I don't think it's the kind of tank that could ever truly be properly tragic inside the game. So this is an interesting situation here. We can see that the T30 clearly wants to come around the corner again, and I'm like, okay, T30, you go and do your job. You do your job, okay? You're not going to penetrate the T95? Alright, so this time what I'm going to do is I'm going to just stay on the outside, I'm going to give the T30 the inside, and I'm going to give him another chance. But one thing that's really frustrating about this position is that I don't feel like that T30 is being very effective against the T95, and I'm jeopardizing myself. And so I've given the guy 2 opportunities to shoot the T95, and I think the T30 has clearly accepted that he doesn't deserve to have the inside position. I gave him a couple of chances, felt like I needed it, because I want to get through this game, and I want to be able to take out these vehicles. And if you see somebody who's obviously not being very effective and also has a great turret but bad upper hull armor or even bad side armor there, he can now go hull down on me. And so it makes perfect sense in this situation as to why the AMX M4 would be the one exposing his strong upper hull armor, and the T30 can go hull down over me. Now, I guess if I was trying to really micromanage there, I'd probably go forwards and try and cover the T30's hull armor. But in the end, he's still alive, and we're managing to cut through the enemy team. And we're now up to 3,600 damage and 3 kills. And so, yeah, the AMX M4, 51, highest average win ratio of any vehicle. Just so, well, of any vehicle, I should say, of any heavy tank. And this was from my first play session after dropping the crew back down to tier 10. If you can play the same tank at tier 9 as you can at tier 10, why wouldn't you? Now, one person actually made a very interesting comment. I believe it was either in Twitch chat or it was with a tip. And they said, is the problem with the tier 10, not that it's bad, but is the problem that the tier 9 is too good? Wow. It made perfect sense to me, and I can totally understand, and I can also agree with what that player, or shall I say, with what that person was saying, because it does. I think this tank is just overpowered at tier 9. I think it's just an incredible match of speed. It's an incredible match of a good rate of fire, aim time, accuracy, gun handling. It's just that thick frontal armor. It's everything. This is the holistic package at tier 9, and to have this kind of frontal armor that a lot of people just take for granted. They expect that they're going to be able to handle this tank, and you can completely punish them for it. Oh, 212A caught out in the open. Wish I was loading a high explosive round there and not wasting my APCR rounds. Now you can see that I've dabbed that 1 key again to be firing standard ammunition, and with that kill we have secured a top gun, but there's still 5 tanks left on the enemy team. Are we going to be able to secure a few more? There's still actually a pools medal on the table here. Let's see what we're able to achieve. But still, this is actually a pretty tricky game here. They've got some high health tier 9 tanks, and 1 misplay by me, now that the game has evened up with 10 kills aside, could prove to be an absolute disaster for us. We've really got to be careful. And look at that ST1, even the 50 TP. The 50 TP is on full health as well. So I decide that the WTF Panzer IV is going to be preoccupied. I decide that the 50 TP might be aggressive around the corner. I'm trying to think about how I get myself out of this situation. So I bounce the Centurion 7-1. Have a quick check to see what the WTF Panzer IV is doing. And I see that he's not focusing on me. So I want to get away from the 50 TP, and I want to try and push the Centurion 7-1, dig them out of this crossfire, and then turn it into an absolute riot for our team. And oh, that was a beautiful moment, right? Did you see that? The head popping clean off the Centurion 7-1, securing our 7th kill of the game. And I'm hoping that I can manage to put one right into the WTF Panzer IV. But just before we managed to fully aim the shot, the Jagdtiger shuts down the tier 9. His opposite number, right, in the turreted tank rather than the casemate design there. Alright, so 6,700 damage now. It's time to go and fight to full health 50 TP. And with the Jagdtiger locked in mortal combat against the Tortoise. Wow, okay, high explosive rounds, mate. That's alright. So 1 round into him, now up to above 7,000 damage in a tier 9 heavy. Again, in the first place session I had in this vehicle, once I moved my crew back down from tier 10. That's just what I was doing, and it's why I hated the AMX M4 54 so much. It's because I knew then my strategy was just ace it, get an ace in it. And I even got a Radley Walters medal at tier 10, and it wasn't quite enough to ace the vehicle. And then once I aced the tank, I was going to move the tank back down to tier 9 and see what it's all about. And oh my lord, am I not going to be able to pick up the kill here? No! The T10 actually finishes off the 50 TP. And it's not even going to be a Radley Walters medal for us. But can we really be that sad when we did pick up 8,000 damage in a tier 9 tank on the very first evening that I managed to get this vehicle back again? Let me clarify one thing as well for everyone, ladies and gents. Do not be baited into stupidity with this tank. Don't get mugged. With the AMX M4 51, don't be a silly sausage. Now, what would a silly sausage do in this tank? Well, let me show you what a silly sausage would do in this tank. The silly sausage would use the top gun. Let me show you exactly why. Let's compare the AMX M4 51 with the 127mm to the 120. So you want to, well, the DPM is practically identical. Do you want to have better pen? Do you want to have better accuracy? Do you want to have better aim time? Do you want to have way better turret first dispersion? These are hidden statistics that Wargaming don't show you in the garage, and I wish they did, because how can you be expected to make the correct decisions as to what different modules and equipment you should use on your tanks if you don't even have the dispersion values available in the garage? Even if you were to mouse over and it would tell you what they would be. These are the hidden statistics that Wargaming use to balance the game that they don't provide for you inside the garage, which is preposterous. Do you want to have better shell velocity? What's the difference on the penetration with these two guns? Well, if you use the 120mm, you got 315 on your premium rounds. If you use the top gun, you got 270. What's up with that? What's up with that? Why is this even the stock gun on the tank? And I think that's also one of the reasons as to why this thing has such a high average win ratio. And it's why you've also got to think about those top 10 lists a little bit. Maybe one of the reasons why this thing has got such a high average win ratio is that it starts with its best gun. Yeah, probably. But I think that's just why it's catapulted so darn high. Anything that starts with its stock gun as being the best gun is definitely going to be one of the easier tanks to get into. And it would definitely increase the average win ratio this vehicle has. But it's totally not only down to that. The tank's just an all-round great vehicle, an incredible performer, and I'm so darn happy that I managed to finally ace my AMX M4 54 and then move my crew back down to this tank, because it is an absolute happy place tank for me now at tier 9. I love tier 9 matchmaking, so much more fun than tier 10. Occasionally tier 7s, occasionally tier 8s. The game feels so much more varied than just tier 10, 15 versus 15 again and again and again and again. It's not that I want to play against lower tier tanks. Sometimes I actually like playing with a few tier 9s against tier 10s on the enemy team as well. I just feel like it breaks up the monotony that is the game, and it's why I've always been a fierce defender of the varied matchmaking, and it's one of the reasons why I think it makes World of Tanks such an exciting game that you can just grind yourself into. Every single round feels like its own little puzzle, and it feels a little bit different. So not really a spoiler anymore. Yeah, our first game on Redshire was an ace tanker. Can you believe it? 1,187 base experience was enough to ace this vehicle. I'm not complaining. I will take it. I'll take it to the bank. I did fire a lot of premium rounds here, but you know what? I just really don't care. I just wanted to ace this tank, get over it. And maybe now that I feel that that's done and I've got a crew back in my tier 9, I can take this vehicle out occasionally onto the battlefield and at least play it with a purpose and play it in a bit more of a relaxed fashion. In our second game, this was the Top Gun, the High Caliber, and a Steel Wall. I guess we got a Steel Wall in both of these games. The armor on these French heavies is very impressive. The tier 10 blocking 3,300 and the tier 9 was blocking 2,700, enough to kill the tank multiple times inside the battle. Yeah, 8,000 damage, 1,852 base experience at tier 9. That's one of my highest on my main accounts recently. And even with the gold rounds that we fired, this was a decent profit with or without Wargaming's event. And so the AMX M4 54, I really think there are better tanks that you could go for. If you want to use 120mm, take the Super Conqueror. If you want to play something with a big chunk of alpha damage, then I even think that maybe why not go for the Polish heavies and go for a 60 TP? Might as well have the same gun depression, no weak points on top of your turret, and have full 750 alpha with very decent premium rounds as well. And for everyone out there who is looking for just an all-purpose frontal heavy tank, it's no wonder why the AMX M4 51 made it to the best tank on my top list of heavies last year. And considering that the stock gun is also the best gun on this tank, don't be tricked into using that 127mm. You don't even need much free experience to be able to use it right from the get-go. So that's it for today, ladies and gents. I hope you enjoyed this one. If you did, give the video a thumbs up, but if you hated it, give it a thumbs down. And if you're watching the video as it's released on Sunday, it's time for a World of Tanks Tech Tree Showcase right now on twitch.tv/QuickyBaby. And this week, the majority of you have voted for the Object 268. And so come along right now as I showcase one of the original tank destroyer lines in the game, culminating with an all-round assault tank. It can snipe, it can attack, it can do whatever it wants. And if you've never seen one of my tech tree showcases before, they're basically like miniature tank reviews all the way up the tech tree, so you can see if it's a line that maybe interests you, or alternatively, if you already have the tanks, maybe pick up a few tips and tricks along the way, or just come and laugh at me trying to play tier 10 tanks. And that's exactly what you all did to me last week when you voted for the AMX M4 54, right? Yeah, backfired on you. Got the ace, and I even got an 8,000 damage game to boot in the tier 9 for it. So I guess I should say thank you to all of you. Anyway, it's my last stream in Belarus for now, because I've had so much fun streaming here that I'm definitely going to be keeping the content rolling, even when I'm away on holiday. So, awesome stuff. And hopefully I see all of you right now. Here we go.